Welcome to the Fit Rich Life podcast, a show where we talk about money, financial independence, entrepreneurship, fitness, and building a life you absolutely love. Have you ever wondered if you could build a business around one of your interests or passions? In today's interview, I speak with Matt Karamazov, who built an online business around his love of reading books. He now gets paid to read all day. In this episode, here's some things you will learn about. 1. Matt's journey from security guard and nightclub bouncer to online business entrepreneur. 2. The power of fuck this events. 3. All the ways Matt makes money online. 4. How you can start making money around your interests. 5. Why you should build a reading habit, and a whole lot more. This is a great episode for anyone who wants to build an online business that is centered around one's true interests. This episode will also make you want to read more books. Please enjoy a wide-ranging conversation with Matt Karamazov. Matt, welcome to the show, brother. Good to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's fantastic to be here with you.
So I'm going to jump right into the deep stuff. Tell me about the time that you lost $200,000 and got kicked out of India.
Okay, we're starting at the beginning, all right, or the bottom, as it were. Probably the most interesting and worst weeks of my life up until maybe a couple of years ago. But at that time, that was maybe 2013, I believe, 2014. And that actually kicked off everything that came next with the reading 1,000+ books in 10 years. Like, that was the catalyst for it. And so I was in my early 20s, and I was the head of this international record label. Like, I had about a dozen heavy metal bands, and it's like death metal bands, right? All over the world, Poland, I had a band in Israel, just all over the world, a bunch in the States, international distribution. My bands were in record stores. So I tried to kind of branch out into physical concerts, and didn't go well at all. And this one in particular, I was organizing it with a local Indian concert promoter. And we got along well enough, at least in the beginning. The plan was to have basically we organized and we rented out this outdoor soccer stadium in a place called Darjeeling, which is northeast India. Gorgeous place. India is just a beautiful country. But we made the stage out of bamboo, and we brought in bands like band members from Toto and Mr. Big, Bad Company, just like really big like rock stars from the 80s and what have you. And this is, I'm kind of gliding over a few details here, but at the very like the day before, or a couple days before the concert was scheduled to start, I realized that I did not book the flights for the opening band that was going to draw like most of the people to the show. And it was completely my fault. Like, it was one of those things that I just assumed had been handled, and evidently it wasn't. So they had no way to get from Nepal to the concert in Darjeeling. It was way too long to drive. They didn't want to drive. So I last minute arranged for them to take a helicopter from Nepal. I believe they're in Kathmandu. So from Nepal to Darjeeling to show up just nick of time to open this huge outdoor rock concert with these international rock stars and like save the show. And that very day, there was an avalanche on Mount Everest, of all things, and every single helicopter and in the entire country of Nepal basically was diverted to look for survivors of this avalanche. So they couldn't make it. They had no way there, no helicopters available, and they couldn't show up. And people stayed away by the thousands, and I lost money by the 100+ thousands, and it was this gigantic failure that was almost completely I mean, it was 100% my responsibility. Like no matter whose fault it was, it was my responsibility because it was my show. And so, yeah, I mean, that happened. And the fallout from that kind of resulted in me, maybe not being officially kicked out, of the country by the government, but it was very strongly encouraged that I do not stick around. And I decided not to stick around. And so I left India and, disgrace, I guess, and basically came back to Canada, not with nothing, like I had, I still had my family, I had my health, I was early 20s, I was in great shape, and I wasn't going to starve. Like there's, like there's rock bottom, and I wasn't there. Like I always had my own, inner resources that I knew I could fall back on. I knew I'd be okay, but it was, a pretty devastating blow, right? And so I basically had to build up from nothing. So, and this is basically the launch pad for everything else. I took well, okay, so I had two jobs at that time. One I'd already been doing, and it was as a nightclub bouncer here in Halifax, Canada. And more to say about that, later. It's one of the best job, one of like just the most fun I've ever had was at that job. It did so many things for me, besides just being a job. But I had that, so I was coming back to that. But then to kind of make up for the rest of this, this financial shock, I took a job as an overnight security guard at a hospital and at a series of hospitals. And sometimes they'd have, through that same company, they'd have me somewhere else, where I'd be, in some, building somewhere overnight. And, what's fantastic about that, again, beside like way above and beyond, the meager, very meager pay that was involved, was the 12 hours per night that I had basically to myself. And, I'm not going to I can't say that I used every single moment of that job profitably, because I wasted some time, I would do whatever at that job. But, for the vast majority of nights, I would basically, I would show up, this was 8 o'clock in the evening to 8 o'clock in the morning. I'd show up with my tray of coffees and a stack of books, and I would just read all night long. And on a busy, like on the very busiest nights at the hospital, I'd get maybe 6 hours of reading done. And this was like the very busiest, and maybe, 4 to 6 hours. But on a slow night, I could read for 10 hours, 10 hours a night, and nothing would happen. It was overnight at this hospital. Nothing would happen. I would just sit and read. I would rip through the absolute greatest books ever written. The first book, like I started counting at that time. So the first book that I finished when I started counting was Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky. And, then I ripped through everything from, Tao Te Ching, one of the one of the foundational kind of Eastern philosophy books. Alan Watts was big influence on me at that time. I was, reading some business books like Brian Tracy, Jim Rohn, all those guys were really, really influential. I got into Tony Robbins, Wayne Dyer, a whole bunch of just like hundreds, like 100 plus books a year, every single year. And this has gone on for, the past, longer than a decade. So yeah, that was basically what came of that. And I don't believe that kind of, that hard turn into a life of reading, it, like I almost know for a fact that it would not have happened if I would have been successful right out the gate with this other company. Because I would, it would have taken off, and I'd be, quote unquote successful. And that's what I would be doing. I'd maybe read a book a month or something, but I never would have fallen in love with reading the way I have. And it wouldn't have changed my life in all of those other fantastic ways. So I owe it everything. And, viewed in that light, $200,000 is a very small price to pay for just a brilliant life of just intellectual curiosity and adventure and just, frankly, wonder, and it's, man, I don't know how that sounds. It might sound kind of lame to some people, but for me, it's the life, man. So.
Yeah, I love it. So I want to dig into a little bit, because a lot of times when people tell their story, like on a podcast, it seems like, oh my God, this incredible journey. There was no, like, even though I lost $200,000 and, basically got kicked out of this country, like then I switched to reading for 6 to 10 hours a night, and it was amazing. I'm just curious, was there a time, like, because I'm sure like that job that you had like within the music industry, like it was one of those jobs like, oh man, I'm really like doing it, like I'm doing big things, I'm young. And
Mm.
then to go from that to being like a nightclub bouncer and a hospital like security guard, like was there a period where you're like, what the fuck am I doing with my life? And then you started to like find this like new path, or was you immediately just like such a positive person that you're like, I'm gonna figure this out?
Yeah, see, that's a very interesting question because I do believe, that I have a fairly high, happiness baseline,
Yeah.
and it's or a happiness set point, if you will. It's very difficult. Like it doesn't happen that something, some adverse event will happen and it'll bring me down permanently. Like that's just not who I am. Like I know that I'll always kind of rise back up to that kind of baseline happiness. But at the same time, no, absolutely not. Like there were times, man, because like it's not, it's not well paying, right? And it's not like a super high prestige job or anything like that. It's funny that the at the hospital, the doctors would be fine. Like I was never been ill treated by any doctor in the hospital, but the nurses, man, the nurses could be such jerks. It was unreal. And that's a minority of them. Like most of them were either really nice to me or just kind of whatever. But yeah, no, I mean it was we're talking 8-9 years of not I'm never making more than 100,000 a year, never really kind of putting much away. I'd have, a little bit of investments or in, just different things like in index funds, things like that, that I could, fall back on, if I had to. And, I was driving a nice car at that time and, and I still do now. But, I didn't have, I wasn't going on $10,000 vacations every couple of months. Like that's, there had a lot of things that you could, you know, buy with money that I just couldn't afford at that time. And yeah, I mean, it would have made my life a lot easier, to have a
Yeah.
little bit of money. And Naval says this great thing about how maybe money can't buy happiness, but it can remove the sources of unhappiness. Like stress and anxiety and things that we all experience if you don't have the money to cover some of these life events. So I definitely felt that. And yeah, I mean, there's tons of just specific things that would happen that just the general like vicissitudes of life, basically just the things that happen that just are shitty.
Yeah.
And I wasn't exempt from that just because I was enjoying most of the journey. There it's up and down, but a general trend up and to the right. And
Yeah.
that's what's important. The trajectory was always up and to the right, as opposed to like where I was at any particular time, right? And that's straight from James Clear. He says, your current results aren't really that important compared to your current trajectory, like where you're headed. So,
Yeah. So, question about the nightclubs security, hospital security. How long were you in those jobs before you went like full time into your current incarnation, which is like, full time online entrepreneur?
hmm. So I was about a month after my 19th birthday. I started working downtown bars in Halifax. So drinking age is 19. You had to be 19 to work downtown. And a month after I turned 19, I was right there. And then I left, or was, and this unceremoniously removed from that world. We'll talk about that later. This was maybe when I was 32, I believe. I believe that's when it happened. So yeah, a good 13 years, and
Yeah.
this is pretty constant. The majority of that time at the same bar, about 9 or 10 years at the same place. So
I love that you shared that because like in my research, like I didn't realize, and I think this is the thing that a lot of people don't realize about people's journey. Like right now, like if I were to come to your Instagram page, you have 116,000 followers and you have, 5 to 6,000 newsletter readers and a strong following on other socials, I'd be like, oh man, this guy's like freaking like always made it.
yeah,
Um, and I think a lot of people don't realize like how long the build is to get
Mm,
to that. So I'm curious, like during this, 10 plus years in, uh, with this one particular bar doing security and stuff, like when did the, like, okay, I want to build a business around my love of reading books? Like when did that idea like come? And then how did you get started?
mm. So yeah, no, absolutely with you on the kind of the success is kind of shrouded in mystery type thing. It's just the things, think that someone's been always successful, right? Well, it's just not true. And I mean, that reminds me of another Naval thing. He says, if you want, someone else's life or something that someone else has, you have to take their entire life, like the great things that have happened and the great things that they have, but you have to take the worst of the worst. Like you have to take the whole thing. You can't just take, pick and choose what you want from someone else's life. I think that's important. But late 20s was when I started kind of publishing my thoughts online, publishing my book notes and things that I was reading, kind of sharing book recommendations. I wasn't getting paid for this at all, and I had a general idea of how people were getting paid for it, but no kind of concrete plans on how to do it myself. And there's definitely a time when I decided to burn the boats, go all in. And it comes from a lower point. And again, this is a book that you and I have talked about, but the Millionaire Fast Lane by MJ DeMarco, what he calls it is a fuck this event, and he calls it an FTE. And if you have a certain FTE that is strong enough, like if you're comfortable, you're not going to change a damn thing, right? And he's got a story that he tells about a dog that's sitting on a nail, and this guy walks by, sees the dog sitting on this nail, and he asks the owner, why the dog is just sitting there. And the owner says, I guess it doesn't hurt enough to move. And that kind of like, that's exactly how it works. Like if it doesn't hurt enough to move, then you're just not going to do it. If you're just kind of comfortable in this sort of default, mediocrity, it's like, that's kind of where you're going to stay. Like you need to have an FTE to really kind of, push yourself out of it and to really kind of take your own life seriously. And, I've definitely had several. I guess the first FTE was the India thing for sure. And I mean, I've had others before then, but, that was a pretty substantial FTE. And then later on, and again, I'll go into as much or as little detail as you want me to, but it was an assault charge that was laid against me, totally false. Tons of police corruption involved. It was like it never even went to trial. Like they dropped it because of the obvious. It was malicious prosecution by this officer. But anyway, long story short, it didn't go anywhere. But the way that worked out, very briefly, is that where I live, you need to have a security license in order to work downtown at the bars. Now they changed the law around, so you had to have one. And they had this weird, like, guilty until proven innocent thing where if you're even charged with anything, you couldn't get the security license. So I couldn't get the security license. So I wasn't fired by the bar or anything. Like they supported me. They paid for my they paid for every single legal expense, right? Because they knew they saw the video, they saw everything. Like obviously I didn't do anything, right? But at the same time, because this court thing was pending, I couldn't work at the bar anymore, and or at the hospital either, because you need a security license for that too. So this kind of cushy reading job that I could just have all my bills paid and read for 10 hours a night, that was completely taken away. And so it was an FTE. I said, all right, fuck this. I am going all in on this thing. I'm gonna make it happen. I'm going to burn the boats, and I am going to make a success out of this business. I'm going to inspire the world to read. I'm going to push books into as many people's hands as I possibly can. I'm going to build a massive following, and I'm just going to make it. And that was really the catalyst. So
I love that story. Was it an altercation with a patron of the bar?
Yeah. He was kicked out for he smashed an ATM or not an ATM, like a debit machine, and so he was asked to leave, and nobody touched him on the way out. Then after he was outside, he punched one of our guys, and so we brought him to the ground. And so I was like holding him on the ground, like I was the one that called the police. And it's funny. So like the video, the evidence that they that they showed me before the trial, like their reason for charging me with this thing was a 1 second video of me kneeling next to the guy on the phone calling the police. So it's like that was their evidence, right? So it's like,
Yeah.
oh, like that. It's infuriating, but at the same time, like I knew that I didn't do anything wrong. But at the same time, like, again, not my fault, but still 100% my responsibility. Because, what do I do now? I go all in, right? I make it happen. I make it work no matter what. And, that's, what I did over the next, little while. And, I
Yeah.
mean, speaking of the Millionaire Fastlane, I remember like still working at that other security job. This was in 2020. It was another sort of off hospital location. And I was, sitting in my car working. One of those, like sometimes they'd have me like sitting in my car, and I was just reading the Millionaire Fastlane on my phone. And, 3 years later, I buy my first Porsche, and like, that's not an accident. Like that's intentional. Like I made it happen. And, it's just, it's just the will to win, to make it, to make it through no matter what. And I have that. I've cultivated it. And, the books that I read kind of inspired me to develop that attitude and that, that belief system even more. And, and also, I mean, the people I look up to in the gym, people like Tom Platz and, Dorian Yates, like the really hard workers, they've inspired my, my self-belief, work ethic, just everything that I pour into reading and business. They're a big part of that as well. So.
Yeah, it's incredible. I think a lot of people underestimate the power of reading, just in the sense that it's like mental bodybuilding or training, to have like an empowering mindset that like is willing to put in the work, overcome obstacles, and like continue to pursue big dreams.
Mm.
And
Books are bicep curls for the brain, man, or bench press
yeah,
for the brain. It's totally true.
100%. It's like I've noticed, like, in the times where I don't feel as motivated about life, like I can just be like, well, what have I been reading? Have I been reading?
Mm.
Like,
Yeah.
because sometimes I'll follow the habit. Like maybe I'll get super into like reading, blogs or email newsletters, and I'll get away from books. And I've just noticed for myself that like I have to keep like books in
Mm.
a solid rotation, because there's something about that type of condensed knowledge that just like keeps me on track for really like continuous progression in many areas of my life. Um
Yeah. Well, Jim Quick has this great line. He says, "You can download decades into days, right? And you
yeah.
can do it for $10,
Yeah.
decades in days for $10, and it's just, yeah. There's nothing else like it. There's another book that I read, I think in 2022. I forget. It's called "It Takes What It Takes" by Trevor Moawad, and he's dead now, but he used to be the mental performance coach for Russell Wilson, the quarterback. And his book's just phenomenal. And there's a story that he tells in that book where he went through this sort of personal experiment. And during the experiment, all he did, like he didn't read books, he didn't talk to anyone supportive, and he didn't sort of read anything inspiring and uplifting. All he did was watch the news, watch just trash TV, and listen to like sad country music or whatever, and just like the worst inputs that you could possibly have, and just negativity, just basically a constant stream of negativity, just to kind of imagine what someone's mind must be like, somebody whose daily reality, like that's what it consists of. And he didn't even make it for a full month. Like he completely just broke down. And like, this is the mental performance coach for the Seahawks quarterback. Like he couldn't take a month of what most people, I don't want to say most people, but many people are just constantly filling their minds with. And it just like it literally broke him. So, I mean, I can't, I would never do that to myself. I always have to kind of just fill my mind with the very, very best. Like Earl Nightingale, you become what you think about most of the time. And that's so true, man.
Yeah. Yeah, I think people underestimate, because maybe do you know what like percentage of people actually read books? Do you have any
Not
idea?
enough. It's significantly less than 100%, which is
Yeah.
that's what I'm working on. That's my thing. I'm gonna
Yeah.
get it up to 100%. Uh, there's a few different stats. I think 46% of Americans didn't read a book last year. It's not totally surprising. I mean, it's awful, but it's not totally surprising. A book a month, it puts you in top 1%. I think. I mean, almost certainly it does. 100 a year. Again, like reading, like the number of books read is definitely a vanity metric. Like I'll be the first to say that. Like I've read 1,370, ever since I started counting with Crime and Punishment. But at the same time, like it's just a number. Like, somebody who's read 800 isn't less smart or, less worthy than I'm. Like it's literally a vanity metric, but at the same time, man, if it's zero, then you're really doing yourself a disservice, right? And it's readily available. Library cards are free. There are plenty of fantastic books, in the public domain. If you have an iPhone, you get iBooks, the reading app. It's just one of 5 reading apps I have on my phone, and you can get some of the best works of world literature ever written by anyone for literally $0. And yeah, it's readily available to everyone. And even, I mean, what people spend on a Netflix subscription, which again I have Netflix myself, and I watch Netflix occasionally. Like I'm not some reading, lifting automaton, right? Like I do fun stuff. I do fun stuff that everyone else does, but at the same time, like it's like there's no excuse not to read one book a year. And I think if you have your life changed by one book, it's really going to inspire you to pick up that next one. And where that leads, you really have to just find out for yourself, because you do not know where that is going to end up. And it's really quite astonishing. And even, I mean, myself, like I will read a book even today, like having read so many. I'll read a book, and the author that I'm reading, right now, will mention 5 other books that I haven't read that look interesting that I might check out. And so the TBR, like the to be read list, just keeps growing and growing and growing. It'll never come back to zero. And some people can kind of view that as kind of in a pessimistic light, like you'll never read everything. But as far as I'm concerned, like that's actually a fantastic, like that's great news. You will always have something amazing to read, and like you're never going to run out of fantastic stuff to fill your mind with. And that also goes in the negative direction too. Like there's no end to the negativity. You can spend 16 hours a day, just filling your mind with the absolute worst that human beings do and are and say. And that's a choice that you can make. And yeah, I think I don't like telling people how to live their lives, but I think in that case, they're making the wrong choice, to choose negativity when it's just as easy or just as accessible to choose positivity. And I think that's a big mistake.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, one of the things that I think has transformed my life again and again and again is just taking anywhere between 5 and 30 plus minutes to read in the morning
Mm,
before I start my day. And,
yeah,
it's all about priming your mind
there you go.
with the right information and the right inspiration, so that you can then like take powerful action in your life. Because like, our minds are constantly like looking for patterns, right? And so if we read something and then we see an opportunity related to what we read, like we can link up those patterns and then we can take action on those patterns. And like you and I are both like huge, proponents of like compounding over
Yeah,
time. Darren Hardy's Compounding
yeah,
Effect, Jeff Olson's Slight Edge. Like,
great book.
and it's like if you do that again and again, like you read inspirational, like empowering information, then your mind links it with some opportunity in your
Mm,
day or your week. And then you do that 7 days a week, 30 plus, days a month, or 365 days a year. You're going to just keep creating like positive opportunities and taking action on them, that
mm,
like it's just like such an amazing thing. So, some people like to read, some people like to listen. I
mhm,
think like just make it a habit, like whether you, even if it's 5 minutes, like just like keep it the good book in the bathroom when you go use the restroom. Easy way to get some quality reading in.
Yeah. Everything above zero compounds, and that's something that
100%.
Sahil Bloom, says. I'm reading his
Yep.
book right now. It's called The 5 Types of Wealth. It's easily going to be the best, or one of the best books I read this year. Like I'm more than halfway through. It's just spectacular. And yeah, everything above zero compounds. It builds this virtuous cycle that just keeps going and going. And you don't know the end of that. You cannot see the end of that path. You just have to keep going. And
Yep.
and man, it's yeah, like what are you going to choose? Like how are you going to fill your extremely limited time? Are you going to choose the positive, empowering choice, or are you going to disempower yourself and make your life demonstrably worse by just filling your mind with garbage? It's
Yeah.
just, it doesn't make sense.
And compounding cuts both ways. So if you're doing
Right?
positive habits, it leads to compounding growth. But if you're doing
Absolutely.
negative habits, it's compounding, entropy.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean,
Um,
nature does that anyway. So you don't want to help the process of nature
yeah,
along. Like just, yeah.
100%.
Mm.
I'm curious. So when did that kind of burn the boats moment happen, when you're essentially like forced to go all in? Like what year was that? What age was that for you?
Mm.
Because again, I'm really trying to pull apart the compression of the
Yeah.
story, because one of my goals for this podcast is to inspire people to take their journey, and then when they don't get success in week one or month one, they keep working at it. So
Mm.
like help me understand like when that event happened, and then like what age or what year was that, and then like how have you moved forward? Because I'm really
Mhm.
like, what I want to get at is like, how'd you make the first few dollars online, and like start to dig into that part of your journey?
Yeah. Yeah. The Okay, so I get first dollar I made online would have been maybe 6 years ago, and this is a few dollars, like not more than maybe $100 a month, like grocery money for maybe a week, and so not much, but it's again that first dollar I think in many ways is one of the most important milestones. If you like once you make that first dollar, you start to realize what's possible, and then you make that first $10, and then the first 100, and then you're pulling in $1,000 a month. Like my business is around $5,000 a month right now, and it's growing quite a bit more. And I can talk about like some kind of goals that are 6 months out or 3 to 6 months out. But yeah, that wasn't overnight at all. There were years and years of $0. Now at the same time, I do think that like now, like if you're really if you want to make a sustainable living online, it does not take you like it will not take you a year to make your first dollar, and if it does, like you're doing something seriously wrong. You can start making money really fast, but at the same time, I wouldn't want to give anyone the wrong impression and say that you can buy some like penthouse apartment in month 6, because that's not going to happen, right? Or it's extremely unlikely to happen. But you can make this sort of compounding progress. And I lived relatively cheaply for a long time, and even then, it kind of it just taught me that I could live happily on a lot less, right? So I didn't experience any sort of lifestyle inflation. So as I started making more money, my expenses didn't go up, because I was always okay. Like I always had this sort of baseline, just happiness. Like I had, friends and family and, books and weights, and, just I had this job at the bar that I absolutely loved, and man, it taught me so many things as well. A little side tangent here. I mean, being a bouncer is, maybe it was, I think, $15 an hour Canadian. So like you can imagine what that is in US. So it's next to nothing, right? And towards the end, I was just working weekends. Like Friday, Saturday, the occasional Sunday. But that is where I learned how to speak to people, and how to stand up for myself, how to listen. My listening skills just improved exponentially. Just once I realized that people, everyone's kind of walking around with this, they say, like that they have like a sign on their head, like "make me feel important," and like everybody has that sign, just on their forehead, right? So just if you listen to people, one, you stop a lot of fights before they happen. Evidently not enough because of what happened. Maybe my listening skills weren't could have been better, but yeah, no, like there's so many side benefits to any job whatsoever. Like you can look at a job like that and think it's totally totally dead end and not worth it. But so many fantastic things happen. And, some of the best times of my entire life, happened at that bar. And like friends that, I'm still friends with now, girlfriends, just like everything. There's so many positives, right? And I even feel that way about starting on YouTube. You don't like, you're not going to make much money on YouTube starting off. Like nobody does. But at the same time, you will learn, how to speak to a camera, how to be more confident speaking, how to write scripts. Like your writing will improve, your video editing skills will improve, your storytelling skills, your like design skills, basic business acumen, like that will go up as well. Like there's so many side benefits to starting a YouTube channel or doing anything, right? That aren't immediately obvious. And I think if more people realize that, they could use their situation wherever it is to find something in it that's going to move them forward. And that's exactly what I did with basically everything that I've done, right? So in terms of timelines, the latest sort of burn the boats, fuck this event was, I'd say maybe 2.5 years ago. I think it was late 2022 that this whole thing happened, or late 2023. It kind of all blends together. But interestingly enough, so it coincided with the time that I read The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexander Dumas, one of my absolute favorite books of all time. It's this like 1,200-page brick. It's just a French adventure novel. I think it came out in 1855 or whatever. And the main character, Edmond Dantes, was exactly like me. He was he was actually thrown in prison, and I never did that. I was at home the whole time. I was just chilling. But he was thrown in prison for a crime he didn't commit, and people turned on him. It was malicious prosecution, just like it was in my case. And he spent 10 years in this deep dark dungeon. And I spent 10 years in this hospital, just overnight, kind of wherever, just reading my books, drinking my coffee for 10 years. And that kind of parallel story. And then I broke out. I started making more money, and like I escaped from Chateau d'If that Edmond Dantes escaped from in the book. And I came back. I sort of arrived as the Count of Monte Cristo with this successful 5K per month business and growing, 100,000+ followers on Instagram, like 160,000 across platforms right now, growing all the time, podcasting opportunities with interesting people, just everything growing and expanding. And I haven't made it yet. Like I'm not exactly where I want to be, but I'm on the path and enjoying myself on the path. And it was because of this sort of this fuck this event that I was like, all right, I don't have this job anymore. I can try and find another job, or I can make this work no matter what. And I just did it. And there's another fantastic book by a friend of mine, Matt Higgins. It's called Burn the Boats, and it's exactly what it sounds like. The only thing, and this is a Schwarzenegger quote, but he says the only thing that Plan B does for you is distract you from Plan A. Like that's the only thing, and it takes you away from focusing on Plan A. So I made, online business and books specifically. That was my Plan A. I had no Plan B, and I went all in. I burned the boats, and I made it. And this was, and again, like the unglamorous stuff that a lot of people don't see was present all along. It was 15, 16-hour days, not always, but a lot of days, like 7 days a week, and not a whole lot of money coming in. During that time, my credit rating kind of just plummeted, right? Because I was like, I didn't have to sell my Porsche, but it was like there was some times where it was like kind of rough, and but it was but I stuck with it. And I came back, and now my 3-month goal, like within 3 months, and I'm already shopping around for my first Lamborghini Gallardo, and like that's not nothing, and like that was completely intentional. And it came directly, like as a direct consequence of having no Plan B. Like this is my Plan A, and it's within striking distance. Like within 3 months, this thing will be in my driveway. And of course, like it's not all about material possessions, but it's kind of like a symbol that like this nothing could bring me down permanently. Like this is like nothing could stop me. Like this Plan A was going to happen. So that's kind of the long version. But yeah, there it is.
I love it. So walk me through, if you're open to it. I'm just kind of curious, like, how are you actually monetizing
Hmm.
your love of books? Like, I mean, I'm sure there's other people out there that maybe they love books or they love movies or something else, but like start to like show us how you're doing it in order to create a template for someone else to like take something they love and like build a business around it.
Yeah, see, I love stuff like this, and it's actually here's where I'm going to come in with something extremely encouraging. I think is that like I'm shopping around for Gallardos, and books are probably the like one of the hardest things to monetize. Like if you're doing almost anything else, like you will make it or you can make it faster than I can, right? Like just yeah, like it's just wild, right? So my business specifically, I've got several different revenue streams, and I can go again as much or as little detail as you want. But basically, the five main ones right now that I'm kind of pouring most of my attention into. One would be authors, sponsorships, and brand deals and things like that with publishers. So I do I do book marketing. So people like authors, publishers will pay me to market their book, and there's a ton of stuff that I can go into there. For one thing, I mean, I don't recommend bad books. Like you really have to have, keep audience trust in mind. Like if you start recommending a book just for the money, like you're going to lose your audience really fast. And I think that goes for everyone. But that is a very, lucrative time. And that actually saved me many times. Like there would be book sponsorships that would come in, and, that was a car payment, and like that was kind of just making it. And that was for several years. So there's that. There's my private sort of business mastermind on school. And it's called Creator Launch Academy, and that's specifically for educational content creators, and not just for books, but anyone who is teaching someone else what they know, want to be like recognized experts. That's basically who I help there. So there's that, and writing on Medium, which I think that one is great for like a fast sort of it's great for your first dollar, but I wouldn't try and if I was starting again, I wouldn't try and I wouldn't go all in on Medium because I don't think the like the expected value to use a business term like is not fantastic. Like you're not gonna buy any sort of supercar with Medium earnings. But at the same time, like what I'll do is I will repurpose my newsletter as a Medium article. And, like I've done that in the past. And like I would take like what I've already written for my newsletter, which is one of my other income streams. And I would literally just copy and paste it into a Medium article. And that article would go on to make, $50. And it took me maybe 7 minutes to take what I've already written and sent to my newsletter subscribers and sort of repurpose it to Medium and, just make money for basically nothing, no additional work. And I will literally take a newsletter mailings, and I'll turn that into a script for a YouTube video, which is the fifth revenue stream. So those five would be the main ones. And, I've got a few others, like a Patreon that's been going for years and years. But yeah, those are those five are the main revenue drivers. And, and yeah, I think, I mean, brand deals and sponsorships are something that almost anybody can succeed at and do really well. And there's actually another fantastic book that I read recently. Again, a friend of mine, Justin Moore, he wrote Sponsor Magnet, and he is the guy, as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to sponsorships and brand deals and things like that. And he's made, I think, $5 million just in brand deals in the last few years. So he knows everything about everything in that sphere. So I think that is a really just a wonderful route to monetization for most people. And especially if you can build up an audience that trusts you and trusts your recommendations, and you act in a more professional manner than other creators that they might want to work with, and you can become top of mind for brands and companies, then you can absolutely make an exceptional living, like a full-time living just from sponsorship. So I think that's one of the best ways to monetize as a creator. And newsletters, I'm very bullish on newsletters. That's basically the pillar of my business. Like I had somebody, I have a premium version of my newsletter, and I had somebody buy a lifetime membership to my newsletter last night for about $200. And it was I was just about ready to go to sleep, and I saw this Stripe notification come in, and it was $200 for somebody, subscribing to something that I set up months ago, right? So that was fantastic as well. And I think YouTube is just like, especially for anyone who wants to, build their authority and expertise. YouTube is definitely where you want to go, and podcasting as well. I think, and obviously you can combine those two, because the more time that somebody spends with you, I kind of borrow a term from the gym. Time under tension, grows your muscles, and time under attention kind of builds trust with people, right? So if people spend more time with you, if they watch an hour-long YouTube video or podcast, or they read like a 3,000 word newsletter every single week, they're going to build up a lot of trust with you, as opposed to, like a Threads post or an Instagram post, maybe takes a couple of minutes of their time, right? That doesn't build up much, like, doesn't build up enough trust, right? So yeah, there's that. And yeah, I mean, it's pretty crazy how it all compounds. Like, I've recently, since I set this Gallardo goal, I've been doing a lot of Gallardo math, and really, I mean, like, I'm doing this in Canadian dollars. It's about $3,500 a month to, and obviously I'll do a down payment, of course, but like, this is no down payment whatsoever. This is taxes, insurance, everything, gas. I'm looking at about $3,500 a month for this Lamborghini Gallardo, and broken down into those 5 revenue streams, that's like 700 from each of them. Like, that's pretty, like, that's nothing. Like, that's like not even one full author promo. That's like 10 members of my community. I think something like $84 per newsletter issue, things like that, and like $20 a day on Medium and YouTube. Like, there are people that make 10 times that much, right? And like, that's it. And like, that's a Lamborghini, right? Like, it's stunning how it kind of all comes together, right? And like, it's just, man, it's the, like, I could not imagine doing anything else. And it's completely up to you. Like, you can give yourself a raise whenever you want. You can put out the content, you can up level your skills, you can make new connections, you can release a new product that you're proud of and that can help people, right? And I mean, sorry to go on and on, but it reminds me of that Zig Ziglar quote. It's basically a guiding principle of my entire life. He says, you can get anything you want out of life as long as you help enough other people get what they want. And I've built my entire business on that. I built everything on that. So, yeah, that's kind of how I feel. That's the brief overview. There's tons of nuance and detail, of course, that goes into that. But that's basically the long-winded answer to how do you make money.
Yeah. No, I really appreciate you going into detail, because I think, it's one of the beauties about like building an online business is there's so many different like revenue sources that you can tap into. So it's not just like selling one thing in one way, but you can sell the same thing or a similar thing in numerous different ways.
Mm-hmm.
And it's figuring out like what that mix of, ways selling the thing that you're passionate about, led by exactly what you said, is like, you can, get whatever you want as long as you help enough people get whatever they want. So for someone who's never made a dollar online, I can imagine they're listening, they're still like, oh my God, like, author sponsorships, school, community, Medium, newsletter, YouTube, Patreon. Where, like, what would you recommend is like the right, like, for a new creator, someone who's like, hey, like, I said this to you offline, but I'm going to like paint the picture for the listener. So I'm a huge proponent of like financial freedom, financial independence. And, a surefire way to get there is to either, work a 9 to 5 and invest in the stock market, or invest in real estate. Those are kind of like 2 proven paths. But those can take, 10 to 15 plus years to hit financial freedom. Whereas if you build a business that supports the life that you want, you could potentially get there in 3 to 5 years building a business. And I think Now, I know you did the burn the boats method, but you started this while you had
Mhm. Yeah.
an income. And so I believe that for anyone who wants to create more freedom in their life, especially kind of when it comes to their work, because I don't believe in actually early retirement and not do anything.
Mm. Yeah.
Because I think most people need to feel like they're being productive and contributing to
Mhm.
mankind or humankind or womankind. But I'm just like, if you're like, someone just came into your critter launch community and they're like, Matt, like, what do I start with? Like, what would your recommendation be?
Yeah, don't do what I did. That would be my recommendation. My sort of my multiple revenue streams, like, do not start with that. That's 100% don't do that. The only way I get away with it is because, like I said, I repurpose a lot of it. So I'm not creating an entirely new newsletter and an entirely new YouTube video and an entirely new thing. Like, they all come together. And, even, I mean, all 1,370 books, I've got, detailed notes on every single book. So those notes become my newsletter. And, those notes are what I sell on my Patreon. And, that newsletter becomes everything else. Like, I'll take, quotes from my newsletter or from those books, and they'll become social posts, right? So everything kind of works together. So I'm not going off into, I guess, I mean, to say it, like, I'm not, doing, the book thing and, drop shipping and social media marketing agents. Like, I'm
Yep.
not like doing all of these things. Like, I have one business, but several revenue streams. And even then, like, that's a lot. You definitely do not need that. That I'm in favor of that for when you get going and you want to sort of protect your downside a little bit. Because, I mean, YouTube, I don't do much or anything controversial on there. I mean, I talk about books, like, that's not, like, I'm not going to get kicked off of YouTube, but, mistakes happen. Like, people get kicked off of YouTube through no fault of their own, right? And they lose. Like, if you're depending on any one revenue stream that you don't control, I think that's a big mistake. And with newsletters, and that's almost assuredly like where I recommend that people start. You more or less own that audience as opposed to renting an audience from Mark Zuckerberg or Masseri, right? Like, you don't own Instagram, so like they can just boot you off whenever. So if your business is built on that, you don't really have a business, and so that's kind of my recommendation there. But yeah, so like start with one and really like dial that in, and if you can repurpose that with limited sort of like extra strain or like no like anxiety surrounding it, then definitely do that. Like, take those opportunities when they present themselves. But at the same time, like, an excellent way to do it is, use the psychological safety of your day job, and, use a little bit of that, like, borrow some of that confidence and stability to your online side hustle. I think that's a perfect way to go. And like, that's fantastic. If you want to make, more progress faster than having like the very idea of burn the boats is like there is no retreat. Like, you have to make it work or nothing. Like, like, that's the thing. But at the same time, like, there's no extra glamour like for doing it with no safety net. It's like, if you make it either way, like, that's fantastic. And a friend of mine, Nick Hutchison, he runs this really big book account on Instagram, and he turned it into $1 million a year business. And what he did was he basically took his or part of his salary from his software job. This was when he was in his early 20s, and he would pay team members from his employment salary, and he'd create leverage that way. So he'd have like video editors and photographers and things like that, virtual assistants that he would pay from his own money. And then eventually he built up that leverage over time, and then he was able to eventually scale it to this $1 million a year business. And now it's just, he's off and running. Like, he's got a book, he's got speaking engagements, and a massive author network and things like that. And that started with the security of a day job. He didn't burn the boats, right? So you can do it either way. And I wouldn't say that there's more nobility or anything in either way. It's whatever works for your situation. But basically, use whatever's thrown at you. And in this case, like, false allegations and this job loss was thrown at me, so I took that and transmuted it into a career that I love, right, and a profitable one at that. So that would be my advice there.
Yeah, I think newsletter is definitely a great place to start because then you can take whatever your interest is and start to create content around it. And it's going to force you to like learn how to talk about what you're interested in an engaging way. And
Yeah.
like, I'm not going to like sugarcoat it. It's going to be a process to learn how to do that.
Yeah.
And it's much easier to do that process when you have like some sort of job that's paying the bills. And
Mm.
it's also a great test to see like, are you really interested in this, or are you just like interested in the romantic idea of having your own like business on the side? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Because I think a lot of people romanticize this
Mm.
idea of being an entrepreneur, and then like for some, it's not for everybody. And I think some people thrive in a more kind of, structured work environment, and other people feel like they're, suffocating. And
Mm.
those are the type of people that need to go like try building something on the side. And I think a newsletter is a great place to start. Especially since you own your email list, you can't like,
Exactly.
as long as you back it up,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
which there's
Yeah.
different email lists. I know you use Beehive, there's Kit,
Yep.
there's MailChimp, etc. But like make sure you back that up at least once a week, because those could go away as well at some
Mm.
point.
Totally. Yeah.
But on that note, just to dig a little bit deeper, say someone wants to start a newsletter, how do they start to get their first few subscribers?
My battery on my computer is kind of running dangerously low here.
Yeah.
But you'll just cut this
Do you
part.
need to
But
plug it in? Go
so
plug it in. Matt has got his computer back up and running. He's got his power cord in. Welcome to the behind the scenes of podcasting. This stuff does happen. So Matt is going to tell us how he would recommend someone get their first newsletter subscriber.
Yeah, on my TBR is how to podcast for dummies, and I haven't gotten to it yet. So just these basic amateur hour things, they kind of crop up. Yeah, first newsletter subscribers are your hardest ones, and there's definitely a degree of social proof that goes into it. There's 5,500 plus on my newsletter right now, so I make sure to advertise that fact. And there's always an advantage though. So for myself, it's number of people that read it. But for somebody who has maybe just a few subscribers, maybe like they're extremely targeted in a way that matters to your target market. So if you're targeting, realtors in Seattle, you could say, hey, trusted by some of the top realtors in Seattle. And, you could have, that be your selling point. You don't need 5,500 of them, but if enough of the right people in your industry trust your newsletter, then that's perfect. I mean, there are entire podcasts, for example, that don't get a lot of listens, but they're listened to by exactly the right people. So that's definitely part of it. But pure numbers, a lot of people say go to family and friends first, like people that you already know. I would say only do that if they're interested in whatever it is that you're writing about consistently, because you want to think about your open rates, like people who are opening your newsletter and actually reading and taking action on things. So just like numbers in that sense don't really mean a whole lot. At the same time, a lot of it is going to be giving a compelling reason to sign up, and like some reason why they would want to trade their email address, which is technically free, but make it in such a way that they feel like they almost should pay for it. So for myself, like I share a list of 100 great books that will dramatically improve your life, and it's a list of 100 books that I've read and I've written complete book breakdowns on each one, and I have it just in this list that you have to be a subscriber to access, or be on my list or go to my website, right? So anything that you can trade for an email address, that's going to work. And also, if you have some sort of budget for it, I would say just throw like throw maybe $50 to $100 a month, like, or whatever you can afford, into newsletter, into ads for your newsletter. Whether that's on Beehive is what I use. I think it's a fantastic platform. But you can just run like $100 a month to a Facebook Facebook ads to grow your newsletter. That can be quite good to kind of, to reach sort of escape velocity, right? To get your first, 500 or first 1,000 subscribers, to really kind of get yourself going, because that's kind of also a motivational thing too. Because it's tough to, it's tough to write to nobody,
Yeah.
if, like, and again, like 3 people are 3 people. I mean, if your newsletter has 3 people on it, like those are 3 real human beings that are reading your stuff. And like, that's not nothing. But at the same time, like it gets to be like, am I going to spend 10 hours a week like writing these newsletters for just 3 people? It becomes a motivational factor too. So whatever you can do to kind of build up initial momentum, and then just when you're off to the races, right?
Yeah.
And then another way that I'm growing mine is through newsletter partnerships. So like I will trade recommendations from people in my space, and that's been really wonderful for me too. So a bunch of stuff you can do, and just to get that initial momentum would be my advice.
Yeah, I'll give one more that I've seen work more recently. And it's kind of like a baby step you can take before or in tandem with starting a newsletter. Is I think there's a lot of growth potential for those who enjoy writing, to write on threads, and to create written content around whatever they're interested in. And then once they start to get some traction, your first, couple hundred, 500 followers on threads, then you can start to create an email newsletter that you promote at the end of like a multi-thread, or what we call a super thread, which is like a longer thread teaching, entertaining, or whatever. And then at the end, like, something like, if you enjoyed this, you'll love my newsletter. Like, here's the link to join. And the reason I really like that is because you can actually take like your thread posts that have performed well and elaborate on those into a newsletter. Right?
Big time.
And then you can do the opposite. If you write a good newsletter, you can take pieces of that newsletter and create a thread post, and you're kind of creating this machine or flywheel effect, where like both types of content are feeding the other content, and then they're both feeding like followers or subscribers to the other. But like the way I learned that kind of stuff was honestly joining like a mastermind, or like doing a course like, Matt's like Creator Launch Academy. So if you're really like interested in creating some sort of online business, like, I was telling Matt before we hit record, like the way I grew all my business success online was by hiring coaches and getting in masterminds. And I'm not saying that because I want you to become a coaching client of mine or join Matt's mastermind. It's just like, if you want to like time travel and get to that point faster, like learn from someone who's already freaking doing what you want to do. And you'll just save yourself so much time in the wasted effort, pain, trial and error. So definitely check out Matt's. We'll put a link in the show notes for Matt's Creator Launch Academy.
Because everything's already been done before by other people. I mean, like other people have succeeded wildly, in everything that I'm doing, right? And, you can learn what they learn. And like sometimes you can just observe kind of what they're doing and take it, just by watching. But then, if you really want to time travel, like you said, just, pay them for their advice and do exactly what they say. And, it doesn't have to be either of us, like you said, too. I mean, there are a
100%.
multitude of, qualified, just exceptional people out there. And, like say you don't like my voice or something, or you don't like, you're just not, you don't want to like learn from me specifically. Just there's somebody out there who knows exactly what you need to know, and you can just pay them for their time and what they know, and just, take what's in their brain and put it into yours. And it's like, if there is a shortcut in online business, it's that.
100%. Yeah. And I love what Matt said is like work with the people that you resonate with. Like if that's Matt, awesome. If it's me, awesome. If it's somebody else, like work with them. And the other power about like either being in a mastermind or getting a coach that like people underestimate is the accountability piece. And like
huge.
Like I've said this probably dozen times on this podcast. I talked about starting a podcast for 10 fucking years. And then eventually my wife
Jeez.
was like, Justin, I'm so sick of you talking about it. Go hire a coach who's going to hold you accountable. Their one job
Yeah.
is to hold you accountable to launching a podcast. And lo and
Mm.
behold, in 4 months, I had my first freaking episode out after like
Yeah.
working with a coach. And that, because it's so easy to get distracted by your 9 to 5 job, your family life, everything else you do. If you have a
Mm.
goal that you've been thinking about for more than 6 months and you haven't gotten traction,
Oh, man.
either it's not really important to you, or you don't have the accountability leverage that you need in order to like get out of like, and like create enough like movement in your life.
Mm. Yeah, no, big time. Yeah, it's accountability is everything. And another thing that it's not, I don't know, it's a highly positive signal that I would look for is a coach that spends money on their own personal
Yeah.
development, like that hires other coaches
Do they
for
drink the
themselves,
Kool-Aid
right?
that they're selling you?
Right. If your coach doesn't have a coach, maybe it's not the right coach for you. Like that's just kind of like how I feel. And like maybe not always. I mean, there's some, but as a general rule, like you want somebody who's actually doing what they recommend, right? Who's actually succeeded at what you want to succeed at too, right?
Yeah.
So like that's a big part of it.
Yeah. And the other thing I think that's really important is you don't need to hire the absolute best coach in the world. Like you don't need to hire Tony Robbins for $1 million a year because he's so freaking far ahead. It's like, you just need to hire a coach that's like a few steps ahead of you that can like, help you get where you want to go and take those first steps. And so again, like, find the one that you resonate with. And it's just really like, it's one of the cheat codes to like success.
I think so too.
Yeah, 100%.
I always say, like, don't hire Bill Gates to, build a website, like he's way too advanced. Like you don't need to hire him.
Yeah.
Like just hire somebody who's, built a few websites that look good, that work, work with them.
Absolutely. So I know reading is your thing. So I want to spend a couple minutes, like, how do people develop like a better reading habit? Like what are, obviously, I think if they subscribe to your newsletter, The Reading Life, they're going to get like lots of, insight into like books that would resonate with them. But like, if you were to give a couple tips or strategies for people to build a reading habit, what would you say?
Yeah. There's so many. I'm turning into like a spokesperson for Naval, but another thing that he says, read what you love until you love to read. And I think that's one of the best pieces of advice. That's something that I do repeat quite a bit because I think it's very true. And like, you don't need to read what I read or what, some like, 1,000 books you must read before you die so that people will respect you and think you're cool. Like it's an arbitrary list. And like, if you're not enjoying something, like just, start more books and quit more books and then read the best ones twice. Like that's kind of like the advice there. Like there is something, like, unless you're completely and totally uninterested in life itself, there is some book out there for you that's going to be absolutely perfect, and that's going to start it off. And like I said earlier, there's there are books that I've read that recommend 5, 10, 15 other books that kind of set me off along a path. It's the adjacent possible, one of the cool ideas that I've come across. How you walk through one door and you're in the next room, and in that next room there are 3 more doors, and like you don't know the end of that, and like it's a lifelong thing. And once you kind of start opening doors and reading books, you don't want to stop, right? So like that's, again, momentum. Like a lot of life is about momentum. And being around readers and people who support your reading habit and who talk about books and discuss ideas, I think that's huge. Same with personal finance. If you hang around people that go to McDonald's 7 days a week, you're going to be heavier than you want to be, right? And if you spend time with people that just watch TV all day, you're not gonna like somehow magically pull away from that. Like the cultural gravity is too strong, and to really resist that, basically join a community of people. Like, not, it doesn't even have to be formal, but just people whose cultural gravity pulls you towards your idealized behaviors. If you want to be in shape, hang out with in shape people, and that's just like how it's done. So
yeah. it's you are a product of your environment. You are the average of the people you hang out with or spend time with. It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
and you are
for
what,
better or
yeah,
worse.
you are what you consume. What we
Mm,
talked about at,
yeah,
earlier in the episode is like, if you're consuming a bunch of garbage content, your life is going to be a garbage.
yeah,
If you're like consuming some of
yeah.
the most brilliant thoughts of the most brilliant people in the world, you're going to have a brilliant life.
hmm Well, and that's how you acquire taste too. Like you surround yourself with the best, and like the best of everything, right? And you'll start to kind of notice patterns, and you'll develop, and you'll be so much further ahead. I think whatever you choose to do, just go through life at world class. Like don't settle for less. And I think like negativity and sort of just like garbage inputs are settling for less,
Yeah.
and like nobody deserves to settle for less. And like that's just man, just don't do it.
Yeah. Curate your content consumption, curate your
Yeah.
people you spend time with, curate the environments that you spend time in. It's like,
Yeah.
be
Well, that
proactive
guy that
about
I
it.
mentioned earlier, Trevor Moad, the mental performance coach for the Seahawks, he puts it as like an ad campaign that you run inside your own mind, and you get to choose like the ad campaign that you run, and you kind of indoctrinate yourself, like you just
Yeah.
you control the
Yeah.
inputs, and you just like choose the best and like the things that are going to move you to where you want to go.
100%.
And it's just like it's a conscious intentional choice that just a lot of people just they default to other people's choices. Like there's a Carl Jung quote. He says, the world will ask you who you are, and if you don't know, the world will tell you. And that's just man, that's yeah, that's how it is.
100%. Yeah. I mean, the reason I got to financial independence so fast is because I literally every single day consumed podcasts, books,
Yeah.
blogs, and I even started a financial independence meetup group where every month
Nice.
30 to 50 plus people would come together to talk about financial independence. Many of them were already millionaires, multimillionaires at the like other end of financial independence. And like literally by doing all of that, like I went from, negative $80,000 in debt to becoming a millionaire in like a little over about 2 to 3 years. So
Yeah.
it's like, I know it seems like it can't be that easy, but like in a weird sense, if you make it a priority to like create that kind of environment, surround yourself with the right
Mm.
people and consume the right content, you really can transform your life. And Matt, I think you're a perfect example of that because like you literally have built an incredible business around your passion of reading. Like you spent a decade like reading and like you're like, man, what if this was
Yep.
my life? Right?
Yeah,
And now
exactly.
it
Like I
is
can't
your
not
life.
share it.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it goes back to what you said about never wanting to retire. Like retirement for me would be not talking about books on the internet, and I just don't see that happening. Like it's not something that I want to do. Like this is what I'll be doing for as long as I possibly can. It's an infinite game. It can keep going forever.
Yeah.
And yeah, like it's just one of those things.
Absolutely love it. Well, I know you have another event to get to, so I'm going to start to wrap this show down.
Mm,
In closing, I always like to ask the guests to share a tip, tool, or strategy, one for fitness or health, one for money or wealth, and one for life and or happiness. So what do you got for
mm.
us?
Okay, where do you want me to start?
Let's start with fitness/health.
Okay. Fitness, I mean, again, for any one of these, like I could go on tangents.
Yeah.
We could talk for a long time. I'll keep it simple. This one, I would say, if fitness is important to you, if it's an area of your life that you want to get handled now, no matter what, I would schedule like whatever it is. Like find something that you enjoy doing. Like it doesn't have to be working out in the gym, but like something that you can reasonably look forward to doing or grow to love, and schedule that first, and then schedule everything else around that. Don't try and fit it in somewhere else in your day because it's just not going to happen, right? And but whereas like if you have it like in your schedule first, and everything else has to find someplace around that, that's when you're going to make it a priority, and that's when the big physical changes are going to happen.
Yeah, 100% agree. I mean, I'm a fitness
Yeah.
coach. It's like if you don't make your workout like the
Mm.
number one like priority in your calendar, like you're not going to create a transformation in your fitness.
Yeah. Well, and interestingly enough, like the word priority, like it's only in the last 100 years that people started pluralizing
Yeah.
that word. And it used to mean just one. Like there was like by definition, it is your priority. Like there's like up until like 100 years ago, there were no priorities.
Yeah.
It was just like the one thing, right? So,
Yeah.
but yeah.
What do you got for money or wealth?
Okay, so I was thinking about this, and most recently in like last few years, and I think like which is kind of when I've made the most progress is when I've like again it comes down to prioritizing it, but when I look at my bank balance every single day, and it's a very simple thing that you can do, and it's like in the morning, like first thing or as soon as possible, as soon as you wake up, basically just look at your bank balance or investment accounts or whatever, and actually face the reality of that situation. And then you know exactly where you are, because there were tons of times when I didn't want to look, like it was too scary to look, like it was not pretty in there, like I don't want to, yeah, it didn't look great. And but I forced myself to look and kind of like take stock of what was actually there. And once you see it, and it's not like a shadowy presence, that you actually see hard numbers, like this is okay, so this is where I'm at. This is my starting point. What can I do now? Like which creditor can I contact? Like how can I earn more money this month than I did last month? Like what subscription can I cancel and not miss? And if you're kind of just, if you're hiding away from that, like if you're running from the reality of your financial situation, it's going to be really hard to make any sort of positive changes. So I would say, face that reality every day. Just the simple act of looking at how much money you have or don't have first, like just look at it and stare it down.
Yep.
That'd be my advice.
Absolutely love it. I mean, I was right there with you when I was 80
Yeah.
grand in debt. Guess what? I was not looking at. I was not
Yes.
looking at how much money I owed all these different, institutions.
Yeah.
And like, in order to transform that, I had to get clear on like, here's where I'm at, and way over there is where I want to go. But like, you can't get to
Yeah.
where you want to go if you don't know where you're at. And
100%.
it's just one of those things, Peter Drucker, what gets measured gets managed.
Yeah.
And I think like looking at your finances, I look at mine every single day. So
Yeah, so do I. Like even like, and now it's like somewhat of a pleasure. Like
yeah,
I see green numbers instead of red,
yeah,
which is so much more motivating,
yeah,
right?
100%.
So
Awesome.
yeah.
What do you got for life and or happiness?
Okay, this one, I like this. I like this story. It's another animal story. I had the dog story earlier. This one's about cats. So here we go. There was this young cat who was like chasing his tail around in circles trying to catch it. And this older cat shows up and he asks this young cat what he's doing, like why he's chasing his tail. And the younger cat says it's like somebody told me that happiness was located in my tail, so I'm trying to I'm running around, I'm trying to catch it. And the older cat says, oh yeah, I've heard that too. I think happiness is located in your tail. But what I've found is when you're walking straightforwardly in the direction of your purpose, your highest aims in life, and when you're contributing to others, when you're acting in service of your family, friends, and community, when you're making life better for others, when you're walking in that direction, then happiness follows you wherever you go. And I've always loved that story, and I think that's very, very, very true. It's like happiness isn't something that you can chase down and like achieve and grab hold of, but you go about your life. And like my years working at the bar, and like those are the happiest times of my life, like just everything else notwithstanding, I had so much fun. And it's just like I was living my life and just having a fantastic time, and just like doing all these things that contributed to happiness, but I wasn't thinking about being happy. My happiness was following me wherever I went. And I think that's a beautiful story and fantastic advice. So
Yeah, I love it. I think,
yeah.
I'm a proponent of like, if you are going to chase something, chase purpose or meaning,
Mm,
and happiness will be a byproduct.
Yeah.
of that
And almost
process.
anything else that you want too. I mean, like, financial success, like that is a byproduct too. I mean, if you're like constantly thinking about that, like, instead, like think about how you can, help other people. Like, like what can you provide to people that you're good at, that, the world needs, that people will pay you for, focus on that, focus on contributing more, and then you'll receive more, as opposed to thinking about what you can get, right? Like think about what you can give, and then you'll end up getting more. Like, and I don't know, I think it's wonderful that that's the way that the world works,
Yeah.
and yeah, I like that.
Awesome. Well, Matt, it's been such a pleasure to have you on the show. If one thing before I tell people or to ask you to tell people where to find you, one of the things I love about Matt and his content is he often will do these breakdowns of like, if you're looking for a book about money or wealth, here's all the best books. Or if you're looking for a book about
Mm.
like mindset, like here's all the best books. And then he does this other awesome thing where it's like, if you like this book, you'll also like this
Yeah.
book. And it's like, I love it because it just like helps me sort through, because there's millions and millions of books. And like
Hmm.
sometimes I'm in a like, okay, I want to read about this topic area. Like, and to have someone who's like a curator, like curate that list down for me. Or if I'm like, oh man, I love that book. Like, what's the next book? And Matt does such a great job of that. So he shares that on Instagram, on Threads, like YouTube, everywhere.
Yeah. Everywhere.
But
Yeah.
on that note, like we'll put links in the show notes, of course, but like if people want to get
Sure.
connected with your creative work, where should we
Mhm.
send them?
Yeah, I would say the three places I think that cover pretty much everything. The newsletter is where I share like, just an abundant supply of book recommendations. That's where I share all my book notes and everything, like other books that you might read if you like these. Everything. Like if you're I mean, it's called The Reading Life. If you want to live the reading life, that's where you want to be. And then YouTube is kind of where I do some business type stuff. A lot of, like I said, a lot of the newsletter stuff is kind of repurposed into YouTube videos where I go a little bit more in depth and things like that, more personal. And then school, it's called Creator Launch Academy, and that's basically for educational content creators, and that's for people who want to scale their reach, revenue, and reputation. That's what I say. That's where you want to be, and it's a fantastic group. It's extreme accountability, but a supportive accountability that it's from like taught by me. We've got other successful entrepreneurs, business owners there, and basically sharing everything that we wished we knew when we were starting out. So that's perfect for a select subset of people who are interested in that too. So that's where I would say.
Awesome. Well, Matt, thank you so much for coming on the show, brother.
Yeah, man. Thanks very much for having me, Justin. I had a great time, and we'll talk really soon.
Sounds good.